The sun had just started to warm the small kitchen in their Nairobi home. Kato Mwangi sat at the table, sipping strong tea, the steam curling into the still morning air. The clink of Aisha's spoon against the sugar jar was soft, almost lost in the quiet, but then came her voice, low, sharp, and secretive. He didn't mean to listen, but her words froze him in place. "Send the hit team tomorrow," she said into her phone, almost a whisper. Kato blinked, thinking he must have heard wrong. His wife liked crime shows, maybe she was talking about a movie. But then her tone changed, calm, focused, deadly. "He'll be at the old railway yard. Around 9. That was his exact location for tomorrow's meeting with an old army friend. His fingers tightened around his cup. For a moment, Kato sat in disbelief, his heart beating slower, heavier. This was Aisha, the woman who laughed at his bad jokes, who pressed warm chapati into his hands when he came home late. Yet here she was, giving away his movements like she was marking a target. The air felt different, heavier, as he watched her turn away, her back straight, her voice fading into the hallway. The tea in his hand had gone cold, but Kato didn't notice. His training kicked in without him thinking about it: measure the threat, watch for openings, never act before you're sure. Something was coming. And if Aisha really meant what he just heard, it would be deadly. Kato stayed very still, his ear tuned to every word Aisha spoke. The way she whispered was not like when she gossiped with her friends. This was colder, sharper. She was not joking, not using any clever sayings. She was giving instructions. Real instructions. "Make sure it's clean. No mistakes," she said, her voice firm. His stomach tightened. She was talking to killers. Not just any killers, she was hiring assassins. Kato's mind raced. It had been years since he left the military, but the past never truly stayed behind. Faces of men he had tracked, targets he had eliminated, and dangerous places he had escaped all flashed in his head. He remembered the long nights on rooftops, his finger on the trigger, and the brief moment when the world would go silent before a shot. His missions had been secret, locked away in files the public would never see. But secrets never die. There were always survivors, always enemies left in the shadows. He could understand strangers wanting him dead. He had made enough enemies to fill a graveyard. But his own wife? Aisha, who once held his hand when he woke sweating from nightmares. Why her? Did someone pay her? Threaten her? Or had she been hiding something from him all along? Kato's jaw tightened. Every movement of hers now seemed different, calculated, dangerous. He listened harder, catching bits about money, about keeping him busy while they worked. The words made his blood run cold. She knew his routines, his habits, even the way he liked to take the long route home. She could feed them every detail they needed. The man on the other end of the call spoke too, his voice deep and rough. Kato caught only a few words: advance payment, guaranteed, no witnesses. The kind of talk he had heard 100 times before, except now it was about him. His mind switched into soldier mode. No panic, no noise. He had to think, to plan. Every instinct told him to grab Aisha right then, demand answers, but that would ruin any chance of finding the truth. He needed to know everything: who she was working with, why she was doing it, and how far the plan had already gone. In that moment, Kato realized the home he thought was safe had already turned into a battlefield. The enemy wasn't breaking in from outside, they were standing in his kitchen, wearing his wife's face. That evening, the smell of fried tilapia and spiced greens filled the air, the kind of scent that usually made Kato feel at home. Aisha hummed softly in the kitchen, just like she used to when they were first married. She set the table with care, placed his favorite meal in front of him, and smiled warmly, her eyes crinkling at the corners. To anyone else, she looked like the perfect wife. But Kato had spent too many years studying faces, watching for tiny signs that told the truth. He saw it immediately: her hands trembled slightly when she poured his water. She kept wiping them on her apron, even when they weren't wet. Between bites, Kato noticed her phone was never out of reach. It sat face down beside her plate, but every time it buzzed, her eyes darted to it. She tried to hide it, smiling and asking about his day, but her voice had a faint edge, like she was forcing each word. He remembered her laugh, how free it used to sound. Now it felt just a little too light, too practiced. Then there was the handbag. It was expensive, the kind he knew she wouldn't buy without telling him. The leather was flawless, the brand logo small but clear. Kato had never seen it before. "New bag?" he asked casually, pretending to be more interested in his food. Aisha's smile didn't falter, but she hesitated just long enough for him to notice. "Oh, yes. A gift from my cousin," she said quickly, her eyes dropping to her plate. Kato chewed slowly, masking the storm in his mind. Every small detail was fitting together into a larger picture. The phone calls. The trembling hands. The new handbag bought with money he didn't know about. She was trying too hard to act normal, like an actress in a play who'd forgotten her lines but kept smiling for the crowd. When dinner was over, she cleared the table with quick, almost restless movements. Her phone buzzed again, and she checked it in the kitchen, thinking he couldn't see her. But Kato's sharp eyes caught the faint glow of the screen and the way she typed back without hesitation. He leaned back in his chair, letting the calm mask stay on his face. Inside, his training whispered to him, this was the part of the mission where you let the target think they still have control. She believed her act was working. She believed he was still the trusting husband, sitting there enjoying his meal. But Kato Mwangi had survived war zones, betrayal, and ambushes. He could play along, and he could play better than anyone she'd ever met. Tonight, he would let her keep her perfect facade. Tomorrow, he would start tearing it apart piece by piece. Kato lay awake that night, staring at the ceiling, listening to Aisha's slow breathing beside him. Every instinct screamed at him to shake her awake and demand the truth, but years in the military had taught him something important: never attack before you have all the information. So he kept still, his mind working like a sniper lining up a perfect shot. If Aisha was planning to kill him, he needed to know who else was in on it, how far the plan had gone, and when they would strike. The next morning, while she was in the shower, Kato quietly picked up her phone. His hands moved quickly, scrolling through her call logs, memorizing numbers. Some were unknown, but a few made him freeze. They belonged to men he had once trained during his years in covert operations. Men who knew his tactics, his habits, even the way he thought. That wasn't just dangerous, it was deadly. Over the next 2 days, Kato moved like a shadow. He bought 2 tiny cameras and planted one in the kitchen and one in the living room, tucked into spots where no one would notice. He also placed a GPS tracker inside the lining of her new handbag. Whenever she left the house, he watched her movements on his phone. What he saw made his blood run cold. She wasn't meeting friends or family. She was meeting with 3 men in a quiet bar on the edge of the city. Kato recognized each one instantly: Mutiso, a close-quarters combat expert; Dan, a demolition specialist; and Kareem, one of the best marksmen Kato had ever trained. These were not ordinary criminals. They were soldiers, trained to kill efficiently and disappear without a trace. Through the hidden cameras, Kato listened as they discussed the plan. Kareem would take the shot from a rooftop, Dan would handle the cleanup, and Mutiso would be the one to confirm the kill. Aisha sat with them, her voice calm as she spoke about his daily routines. She told them when he usually left the house, where he liked to park his car, even the small habit he had of stopping for coffee before a meeting. She was handing them his life on a silver platter. Kato felt a deep, quiet rage settle in his chest. This was not some random betrayal. This was personal. She had chosen people he had once trusted, men who had fought beside him. That cut deeper than any bullet could. Still, he didn't make a move. He knew if he acted too soon, they might scatter, and he would lose his chance to stop them all. So he let them believe they were ahead. He watched, listened, and learned every detail of their plan. By the time Cato was ready, he knew exactly where they would be, what weapons they would use, and even the angle of Kareem's rifle. They thought they were hunting him. They had no idea the real hunt had already begun. The morning of the hit was quiet, almost too quiet. The sky was pale and heavy with clouds, the kind that made sound travel far. Cato moved through the empty streets like a ghost, his steps silent, his eyes scanning every corner. He had been to the old railway yard hundreds of times before, but today it felt different. This was the place where his wife and her hired killers planned to end him. He intended to make it the place where their plan died instead. He arrived 2 hours before the meeting time. His hands moved quickly, setting up 2 sniper points, one on a rusted water tower and another hidden behind a stack of old cargo containers. He checked every angle, every line of sight. This was his territory now, and he would see everything before it happened. Through his scope, he could watch every entrance, every shadow. The minutes passed slowly, each one stretching into what felt like an hour. Then, movement. Aisha appeared at the far end of the yard, wearing a long coat and dark glasses. Even from a distance, Cato could see she was tense. Her eyes kept darting around, scanning the area. Beside her walked a tall, shadowy man carrying a black duffel bag. Cato didn't need to guess what was inside: rifles, ammunition, maybe explosives. He knew the weight of that kind of bag. They stopped near an abandoned train carriage. Aisha pulled out her phone, likely sending a signal to the others. Cato's scope shifted, catching sight of Kareem on a nearby rooftop, crouched low with his rifle. Dan and Mutiso weren't far either, hidden but not well enough to escape his trained eye. They were spreading out, moving into position, thinking they were about to trap him. Cato's breathing slowed, his focus sharpening to a razor's edge. This was the moment he had been waiting for. He let them settle into place, gave them just enough time to believe they had the upper hand. Aisha stood with the shadowy man, her hand resting on the duffel bag as if guarding it. She smiled faintly, the kind of smile someone wears when they think victory is close. Through the scope, Cato could see Kareem adjusting his aim. That was his cue. A single suppressed shot cracked through the air, striking the metal beside Kareem's rifle and making him flinch back. Before he could recover, Cato fired again, this time hitting the rooftop just inches from his hand. Non-lethal, but enough to send a clear message: you've been spotted. In the chaos, Cato moved to his second sniper point, keeping all of them in his sights. Dan tried to advance, but a shot to the ground in front of him froze him in place. Mutiso ducked behind a wall, only to have a bullet ping off the brick beside his head. They were trapped, surrounded by angles they hadn't even considered. And all the while, Cato watched Aisha. Her confident posture was starting to crumble. She was beginning to realize something she hadn't thought possible: she was not the hunter today. She was the bait in a trap she didn't even see coming. Kareem was the first to realize the shots weren't random. Every bullet landed close enough to scare, far enough to wound nothing but pride. His rifle clattered to the rooftop as he raised his hands in surrender. Dan tried to rush forward again, thinking he could reach cover, but Cato's next shot punched a hole in the dirt right at his feet, sending a cloud of dust into his face. Mutiso peeked from behind a wall, only to have a bullet snap the edge of the brick beside him, showering him with small fragments. It was a message they all understood: Cato could hit them any time he wanted, and they wouldn't even see it coming. The yard was silent except for the echo of those controlled shots. Cato moved like a shadow, stepping out from behind the cargo containers. His rifle rested easily in his hands, but his eyes were cold, locked on the woman standing near the duffel bag. Aisha's smirk was still there, but it was thinner now, forced. She opened her mouth to say something, but Cato spoke first. "I heard every word," he said, his voice steady, low, the kind of voice that made a person's skin go cold. Aisha froze. For a second, she tried to hold his gaze, but her eyes flickered to the men around her, her so-called hit team, now humiliated, trapped, and completely useless. Cato walked closer, each step slow and deliberate, the gravel crunching under his boots. "You thought you could hide it," he continued. "You thought I wouldn't notice the calls, the meetings, the lies. You thought I wouldn't remember the men I trained, the men you brought here to kill me." Her face changed. The confidence drained out of her like water from a cracked jar. Her lips trembled, but no words came out. The color in her cheeks faded. She took a step back, almost bumping into the shadowy man with the bag, but even he was looking at the ground now, unwilling to meet Cato's eyes. "You wanted me dead," Cato said, stopping just a few feet from her. "But you forgot one thing." He lifted his rifle slightly, the barrel pointing toward the sky. "You can't outplay a man who taught you the game." The silence that followed was heavy. Aisha's breathing quickened. Her hands twitched at her sides as if she was thinking of running, but she knew she wouldn't get far. Her perfect plan was gone, stripped away in minutes, and all that remained was the truth, that she had been beaten before the first shot was ever fired. Cato lowered his weapon and stepped even closer, so close she could see the calm in his eyes. That calm scared her more than the rifle ever could. She looked at him like a person staring into a storm they couldn't stop. When he finally turned away, she let out a shaky breath, but it wasn't relief, it was the sound of someone who knew their world had just collapsed. The man she thought she could kill had just walked through her trap untouched, leaving her with nothing but the wreckage of her own betrayal. Cato stood there for a long moment, watching Aisha struggle to find words. Her eyes darted around, searching for a way out, but there was none. The killers she brought had already given up, their weapons tossed aside, their pride shattered. He could have ended it right there with one pull of the trigger, but death would be too easy. Aisha needed to feel what she had planned for him, fear, loss, and the weight of knowing she'd been completely beaten. Over the next hours, Cato made the calls. First to her family, telling them everything, letting them hear the recordings from the hidden cameras. The shock in their voices was almost as sharp as the shame that would follow her name forever. Then to the police, who arrived with quiet efficiency, handcuffing her while she tried to protest. Finally, Cato reached out to the people she owed money to, forwarding them proof of her betrayal. In their world, that kind of news traveled fast, and mercy was never part of the conversation. By nightfall, the old railway yard was empty except for Cato. The police van had already taken her away, her screams echoing faintly in the distance, more furious than frightened. She knew she would be behind bars for years, her perfect murder turned into a perfect humiliation that would follow her everywhere. Cato slung his sniper rifle over his shoulder and started walking. His boots crunched softly against the gravel. The cold night air wrapped around him, and he didn't look back. He had survived enemies on battlefields across the world, but this was different. This was personal. And now, it was over.